Over the past 2 decades, there has been measurable success in improving water quality by shutting down the obvious sources of pollution. But much more needs to be done. The quality of water in our streams, rivers, and bays remains a real concern. The challenge now is how to tackle those less apparent, more pervasive forms of pollution that come from the land and degrade water quality. One answer to how may be in the trees that grow along our streams.
It's difficult to imagine that 30 years ago this site was a cow pasture, but fortunately the landowner at that time was aware enough about the effects of land use on water quality that he had the foresight to establish a forest buffer, not knowing that it was a forest buffer at that time, but reestablished the streamside forest in this particular area, and therefore rejuvenated this little piece of stream that flowed through the cow pasture.
The land area from which water drains to a single body of water is known as a watershed. The Mid-Atlantic region has one of the most productive watersheds in the world, the Chesapeake Bay. There are more than 100,000 miles of streams in this watershed. The quality of water in a stream, and ultimately of the body of water into which it flows, depends in large measure on the land next to the stream. The land bordering a stream is called the riparian area. When it is vegetated, it can provide a natural filter for pollutants, protecting the stream from activities on the land. This is called a riparian buffer.
People often think of a stream as this water that flows between the two banks. But a stream is so affected by the vegetation and the soil next to it that we really have to think of the stream and the riparian area as one system, as working together. Riparian areas really link the land and the water together, and streams, of course, link the landscapes together in a watershed.
When Europeans arrived in the early 1600s, they found a land of thick forests that rose to amazing heights. During the next 300 years, much of the land was cleared for farming, timber, and firewood. Today, forests, including those along streams and rivers, continue to disappear. As these forests disappear, so too do their beneficial effects. The loss of riparian forests creates a world of harm for streams and watersheds.
The forest has an enormous capacity to capture rainfall and to store and infiltrate water on the site. For example, a forest compared to a pasture or a turf lawn can hold and store and infiltrate probably 15 times what you can find in a grassed area, maybe 40 times that what we find in a cultivated field. In addition, the porous forest soil, the ability to infiltrate water, and the many diversions and diverse structure of the forest floor also helps to slow down runoff that may enter the forest from upslope. Once in the soil, of course, the water can infiltrate and move down towards the stream. Then, essentially, as we look at the forest soil, we find two processes at work that are helping to not only capture and use that water, but help to remove the nutrients from it. The first process is really something that occurs below our feet. It's what occurs in the soil. And it's a process called denitrification. And it's essentially the process of denitrifying bacteria that thrive in this organic, carbon-rich environment of the forest floor that's been built up from years and years of the accumulation of leaf litter. And essentially denitrifying bacteria, through their growth, consume or use the nitrates and essentially convert them to nitrogen gas, which is released into the atmosphere. The other process really at work in the riparian forest is the ability of trees and other vegetation to take up the water and with it the nutrients and actually incorporate them into the living mass of the tree, whether it be in the trunk, in the limbs, in the roots and the stems and the leaves. And it's a dynamic process. The ability to recycle that material within the riparian forest is what makes the forest valuable to us as a water quality buffer.
Riparian forest buffers also lessen the impact of heavy rains and floods. The leaves and branches help break the force of rain falling on the forest floor, which cuts down on the sediment washed into the stream. Along the stream and in the stream itself, woody debris helps diffuse the force of severe rains and floods.
Essentially, trees help to anchor the stream banks with a dense and very fibrous root system that helps to resist the flow of water. Woody debris in the stream, of course, serves a variety of purposes, both helping to form the channel structure, providing ability to trap sediments and gravels in the stream bottom, as well as providing habitat.
The twigs, the tree trunks, the limbs that fall into the stream all provide physical habitat for either aquatic macroinvertebrates or fish. Any fisherman knows that a good place to look for fish is on undercut banks where you have roots extending into the water. That's because that's one of the major feeding zones of fish.
Riparian forest buffers are among the most productive areas for fish and wildlife because the basic needs for food, water, and shelter are available within a very small area. Riparian forests also serve as wildlife travel corridors between habitats. As scientists began to understand the benefits provided by riparian forests, they developed a three-zone buffer system to protect water quality and stream habitat. Each zone provides certain ecological functions.
The first zone of the buffer is intended to be a zone that's managed to control runoff and concentrated flow. In other words, water that runs off a field or a disturbed area needs to be slowed down and settled out and allow water to infiltrate in this area. As water passes through this filtered zone, both on the surface and in the underground, it moves into a forested zone. That middle zone of the buffer is intended to be a managed zone, where both landowner objectives as well as the objectives of water quality and other habitat benefits or environmental benefits may be accomplished. Zone 2 generally expands and contracts to meet those objectives. In Zone 2, we manage to get the water quality effects that are going to come from the vegetation, from the ability of the soil to treat the nutrients that are running off of this area, and to begin to form a transition to the stream or to the water body. The area closest to the stream is managed for the stream. Our objectives are to maintain the health of the aquatic system here by stabilizing the stream banks, by providing shade and food, and providing needed habitat that really only can be provided by the vegetation that grows along the edge of the water. It provides a last line of defense for the stream. Although there's a great deal of technical guidance and formulas for figuring out width and so forth, the three-zone buffer concept is really most valuable to us as a way to organize our thinking about how we would establish and manage a buffer over the long term so that it can provide both the protection of the stream environment as well as help us do the job of filtering and removing pollutants from our upslope activities.
Land uses such as farming, urban development, and timber operations all affect the stream, each in its own way. Let's look at these influences, beginning with agriculture. In recent years, farmers have made great strides in keeping agricultural nutrients, such as nitrogen and phosphorus, on the land, and have significantly reduced the amount of these chemicals that reach the streams. Adding forest buffers to existing farm management systems further reduces the potential of contaminating streams. John Hageman raises cattle on a 125-acre farm in Maryland. He worked closely with the State Forestry Agency and with the help of volunteers, planted a riparian forest buffer along the stream in his pasture.
We worked up a plan to plant about 5 acres on either side of the stream, and that's what you see what you see now, runs about 2,000 feet from Cool Spring Road down to the property line, and it has about 3,000 trees planted there. What you see now is the result of 3 years of growing down there. I worked with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and we put a stream crossing in there to keep the cattle from going across the stream bed.
While forest buffers serve an important role, they are not a replacement of one conservation measure for another. Rather, the buffer is a powerful and effective last line of defense between farmland and the stream. Forest buffers should be integrated with other conservation and nutrient management practices.
We use a rotational grazing system. We're up to about 80 head now, and provide water for them, mostly from the well systems on the farm. We have 3 wells here.
Cattle farmers benefit from forest buffers in many ways, including improved herd health, better water quality for downstream neighbors, enhanced fisheries, recreational benefits, and the production of forest products. There are also personal benefits as well.
The primary reason I did it was to ensure water quality for the cattle, and a close second would have been perhaps a concern for the condition of the stream, breakdown of the banks, cattle loafing in the stream during hot weather, and with an increase in the number of livestock on the farm, I felt that would have a much greater degrading effect on the stream. And that was our major instigation. Some of the other things, though, have become more important, I think. Wildlife, it provides a corridor for wildlife. We have a lot of songbirds in there now we didn't have before, and I think as these trees mature, we'll see more and more of that. It provides shade for water, and fish, particularly trout, do not like warm water. And as the trees grow up, they'll shade the water and provide a more habitable area for trout, we think, and aesthetics.
Riparian forest buffers can be harvested to provide a sustainable flow of products, as well as preserve wildlife habitat and clean water. These benefits come from environmentally sound management of the forest. A professional forester can prepare a management plan that not only promotes a healthy stand of trees, but also protects the stream. Today, loggers are trained to understand the value of riparian forests. Through the use of environmentally sensitive logging practices, they protect soils and streams during forest harvest operations. Urbanization has placed a heavy burden on our rivers and the bay. A major problem for streams is stormwater.
In our urban watersheds, one of the problems that we frequently see is that people don't understand the relationship between their streets and parking lots, their yards, their rooftops, all of the impermeable surfaces that are in urban areas. They don't understand the relationship between those and their urban streams. When we get a heavy rain, everything on the streets, in their yards, on their driveways, all flushes into storm drains. Those storm drains ultimately lead directly into our urban creeks. So anything that goes on that land area, whether it be fertilizing yards, spilt oil, trash in the streets, all of that debris and all those pollutants can eventually end up, and often end up, in our local streams. By establishing a forest buffer, we're able to take any contaminants, whether it be trash or road salts or heavy metals, anything found on the roads that's running off with that rainwater. The buffer is a line of defense to filter some of that material out before it reaches the streams. I think this is one of the most important things that the buffer can do in an urban area to help clean the streams up.
Urban areas can concentrate large volumes of water in short periods of time, causing erosion and scouring of stream banks and beds. The cost for municipalities to deal with stormwater and sediment can be significant.
We're standing on the banks of Lake Audubon in South Reston, and this is a 45-acre man-made lake that was built here about 20 years ago for stormwater management, recreation, and as you can see, to have property enhancement. In 1994, in this very lake, we had a 25-foot tugboat. We had all that equipment, and of course, it's quite a hit with the kids, but the real purpose of it was to remove 10,000 cubic yards. We spent $200,000 on that project, and we actually only dredged about 3 acres of the lake.
Urban forest buffers help moderate summer air temperatures and improve the quality of life for wildlife, fish, and community residents.
Some of the activities that go on in this particular park area are jogging, cross-country skiing, horseback riding, bicycle riding. There are interpretive areas where school children come through and look at various tree species. They look at the stream for water quality.
For many people, riparian forest buffers are a little piece of wilderness that relieve the pressures of city life.
The values of an urban riparian forest buffer as compared to one in a more rural agricultural setting are typically the same. You have the filtering, removing of nutrients before they reach the stream. Obviously a forest buffer removes sediment. But in an urban area, one of the most important things is the wildlife habitat that is provided. Urban wildlife have been pressured through development and removal of their natural habitat to the point where oftentimes the stream corridors offer the only available habitat to them.
A number of efforts are currently underway to restore and protect urban streamside forests.
It's an educational challenge or opportunity, depending how you look at it, to get our residents to take a piece of their yard that maybe is running off down into a local creek and have them create a filter strip or a biofilter, or reforest it or naturalize it, reduce the need for them to mow it.
Typically in urban watersheds we find that the banks become heavily eroded due to the high velocity and volume of water that comes downstream during a storm event. In order to counteract this, we're trying to use live black willow stakes and red osier dogwood stakes driven into the bank during the dormant season, hoping that they'll establish themselves, root, and then hold the bank in place.
In addition to planting live stakes, there are other stream bank restoration techniques, such as fascines, which are bundled twigs that are buried to encourage rapid growth. Biolog and other barriers absorb the force of high water during peak flow.
The majority of these trees in urban areas are planted with volunteers. Getting people from the local communities out to their stream corridors to be involved in an environmental project gets them interested, and it also educates them as far as the watershed concept and how what they do in their communities affects their local stream systems.
Whether they are in the country, the suburbs, or a city, riparian forest buffers serve valuable functions. They maintain the stream's environment, improve water quality, provide habitat for wildlife, and are places where people can relax and enjoy nature. The benefits are immense. Our aim should be to leave the buffers that are there and to reestablish forest buffers that have been lost. But ultimately, enhancing riparian forests and streams in our watershed will depend as much on cultivating a stewardship ethic among landowners, communities, and elected officials as it will on planting trees. There are streams near you that need your care and protection. Each landowner or community can take action to protect and improve their particular part of the stream. When these individual efforts are added up, the effect will be surprising. And the benefits for water quality, fish, wildlife, and people will last for generations to come.